News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Alexis Christoforous.
Alexis, the first full month of the war with Iran is coming to a close, and President Trump is ramping up threats even as he considers his options. The Wall Street Journal is reporting the president has told aides he is willing to end the U.S. campaign against Tehran, even if the Strait of Hormuz remains largely closed. The report says the concern is that a mission to pry open the choke point could extend the conflict beyond the president's 4 to 6 week timeline. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says President Trump still wants a deal with Iran.
The president is focused on achieving the objectives of Operation Epic Fury. With respect to forces that are on the ground in the Middle East, it's the job of the Pentagon to create maximum optionality for the commander-in-chief. It does not mean the president has made any additional decisions.
Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at the White House, and we get more from Bloomberg's Jumana Bersetchi in Dubai.
To be clear, this has not come from President Trump himself. This is reporting in the Wall Street Journal. And actually, the latest from President Trump is a Truth Social post that he put up yesterday, suggesting that they are in discussions with a more, quote unquote, reasonable regime in Iran, that a deal will be probably reached shortly. After which, and then he says, if the strait is not immediately open for business, we will conclude our stay in Iran by blowing up and obliterating power plants, oil wells, and Karg Island.
Bloomberg's Jumana Bersetchi reports in the meantime, an Iranian drone struck a fully loaded Kuwaiti oil tanker docked in Dubai early this morning. Kuwait's state-run oil producer says the Al Salmi was in an area packed with ships waiting to leave the Persian Gulf. It says the strike damaged the hull and started a fire, but no oil was leaked and all 24 crew members are safe.
And Nathan, analysts say if Iran ends up taking control of the Strait of Hormuz, it will be a major military miscalculation by the U.S. Paul Wallace is managing editor for the Middle East for Bloomberg.
It would be very difficult to argue that it's not a strategic disaster for the U.S. This is a waterway, a choke point that was obviously very much open before this war started. And if the U.S. ends this war, having lost control over that strait to Iran, that will go down badly and look like a major strategic error.
Bloomberg News managing editor Paul Wallace says Iran would take in billions of dollars if it were able to take control of the strait.
And Alexis, gas prices in this country have officially topped $4 a gallon. AAA says the nationwide average retail price for regular unleaded rose to almost $4.02, the highest since August of 2022. One energy consultant warns that oil will skyrocket even further if the war goes on.
The prices will go through the roof. It doesn't matter what President Trump says.
What is going through the roof? Are we looking at $200 oil? If
we're looking at 150 first and 200 and maybe even more than 200. Beyond 8 weeks, it could go anywhere.
Chairman Emeritus Feridun Fesharaki of FGE Nexent ECA made those comments to Bloomberg's Hasland Amin.
A new United Nations study finds the U.S. and Israeli war against Iran could wipe out nearly $200 billion worth of economic growth across the Middle East. The report says the overall loss could wind up costing some 3.6 million jobs and push as many as 4 million people into poverty.
Alexis, Fed Chair Jay Powell says it's too soon to know what kind of economic impact will come from the war. Speaking at Harvard University in remarks heard live here on Bloomberg, Powell said the central bank can afford to wait out the crisis.
You know, it's one of those times where you get a series of supply shocks. First the pandemic, then the much smaller one from tariffs, and then we're getting now an energy shock. No one knows how big it will be. It's way too early to know. As I mentioned, we do think our policy is in a good place for us to wait and see.
Fed Chair Jay Powell says the labor market remains challenged, but the economy remains dynamic and productive.
We now turn to the markets, Nathan, where futures are higher on that Wall Street Journal report that President Trump had signaled he was willing to end the military campaign against Iran. Checking futures right now, S&P futures up nearly 1%. Dow futures now up 444 points, with NASDAQ futures climbing 205 points. But it has not been a good one for the bulls as we close out the first quarter. Rob Hayworth is Senior Investment Strategy Director at U.S. Bank Asset Management.
It's been challenging because there hasn't really been any place to hide. The one place we liked to start the month that has actually worked out for us a little bit is global infrastructure, with master limited partnerships in that component doing fairly well. But otherwise, unless you owned energy this quarter, there's not been a lot of places to hide.
U.S. Bank Asset Management's Rob Hayworth. So far this year, the Dow is down almost 6%, the S&P 500 off by 7.3%, and the NASDAQ down 10.5%. And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Alexis Christoforous.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.